The Resolute shuddered violently as another volley of plasma torpedoes rocked its hull. Captain Sarah Kane gripped the armrests of her command chair, her knuckles white. The bridge was a controlled chaos of alarms, shouting, and the distant rumble of impact. "Shields down to 23%. Lieutenant Mark Bowen's voice broke through the din, his tone a rare mix of anxiety and professionalism. "We can't take another hit like that." Kane kept her eyes fixed on the main view screen, where an alien warship loomed. Sleek black, and bristling with unfamiliar weaponry, it sliced through the darkness like a predator closing in for the kill. This was supposed to be a routine escort mission for a supply convoy, but the ambush had turned their task into a desperate fight for survival. "Any luck with the distress signal?" Kane asked, her voice calm despite the tension tightening in her chest. "Negative," Bowen replied. "We're being jammed. No one's coming." Kane cursed silently under her breath. The alien vessel had appeared out of nowhere, cutting them off from the convoy. There had been no warning, no communication, just an overwhelming assault. Their ship was outgunned, and their enemy showed no sign of relenting. She glanced around at her crew. Faces strained with fear but focused. They trusted her. The weight of that trust bore down on her like the gravity of a collapsing star. She couldn't let them die here, not without a fight. "We need options, people," Kane barked, standing now, pacing to the tactical console. "What are we dealing with here?" Bowen pulled up the tactical display. "No clear intel on these ships, Captain. Best guess, they're using tech we haven't seen before. Weapons systems way beyond anything we've encountered." "And their objective?" Kane asked, her mind racing for a strategy, any strategy that might buy them time. Bowen hesitated. "Seems like pure destruction. No attempts to board or communicate. They just want us gone." A surge of anger flared within Kane. Whoever these aliens were, they were more than just an enemy. They were a force of annihilation, a threat to humanity's fragile foothold in the stars. But humans didn't surrender. Not without leaving scars on the enemy. "Fine," Kane said, her voice cold and sharp. "If they want to fight, we'll give them one. Divert all power to the engines. I want to get behind that thing." Bowen frowned. "We'll lose what little shielding we have left." Kane met his gaze. "If we don't move, we're dead anyway." Bowen's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "You heard the captain," he shouted to the rest of the crew. "Full power to engines." The Resolute groaned as its engines roared to life, surging forward. Kane's heart pounded in sync with the ship's pulse. The alien vessel adjusted its trajectory, preparing to fire another salvo, but the human ship was quicker, weaving erratically through the stars. "Now!" Kane ordered. The Resolute arced behind the alien ship, its weapons trained on a cluster of exposed thrusters. "Fire everything we've got!" The ship's cannons unleashed a barrage of missiles and plasma fire. Explosions rippled across the alien vessel's hull, but the victory was short-lived. The enemy ship, wounded but far from defeated, began to turn, charging weapons once more. Bowen's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, they're powering up a new weapon! We're out of time." Kane's eyes locked on the view screen. Her mind raced, balancing desperation with determination. They were not going down without a fight, but the odds were growing worse by the second. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she commanded, the tension rising like a storm about to break. As the alien weapon hummed to life, the bridge fell silent, everyone awaiting the next move, knowing it could be their last. To be continued. The Resolute plunged forward, engines roaring as it darted behind the alien warship. On the bridge, the tension was palpable. Captain Kane stood rigid at the center, her eyes locked on the enemy vessel, watching for any sign of their next move. Every second mattered now. The alien weapon charging in their wake was not something they could outrun. "Incoming fire!" Bowen's voice cut through the air, sharp and urgent. The ship lurched violently as a plasma blast grazed the starboard side, throwing several crew members to the floor. Sparks rained down from damaged consoles, filling the bridge with the acrid stench of burnt circuitry. "Damage report!" Kane barked, steadying herself against the command chair. Hull integrity down to 40%. Life support's holding, but we're losing power to the aft shields, a technician replied, his voice shaking. Kane swore under her breath. They were running out of options. Can we make another pass? She asked, her gaze shifting to Bowen, who was furiously typing into his console. Not unless we want to end up as space debris, Bowen muttered. We're limping as it is, and they're adapting too fast. That last hit was close. They've figured out our maneuvering pattern. Kane's mind raced. This enemy wasn't just advanced. They were learning, anticipating their every move. But humans had one edge: unpredictability. All right, we're changing tactics, Kane said, her voice steely. Divert all power to the forward shields and engines. We're going to do something they won't expect. Bowen's brow furrowed in confusion. What's the plan, Captain? Kane gave a grim smile. We're going straight at them. The bridge fell silent. Even amid the chaos, Kane could feel the weight of her crew's eyes on her, questioning, but trusting. It was a desperate move, but desperate was all they had left. Captain, are you sure? Bowen asked, his tone uneasy. If they fire again. They will, Kane interrupted. But they won't expect us to close the distance this fast. If we get in close enough, their larger weapons will be useless. Bowen hesitated for only a moment before nodding. You heard the captain. Forward shields and engines, now! The Resolute groaned as the remaining power was funneled into the forward thrusters, and the ship surged ahead. On the view screen, the alien warship seemed to loom larger, its deadly array of weaponry glowing ominously. Kane clenched her fists as the distance between the ships closed, her heart pounding in her chest. Captain, they're preparing to fire again, Bowen warned. Steady, Kane murmured, her eyes never leaving the screen. A blinding flash erupted from the alien ship's main cannon, and for a split second, the bridge was bathed in white light. But the Resolute had already veered hard to the left, narrowly avoiding the blast. Now! Kane shouted. Fire everything we have at their engines! The ship's guns roared to life, sending a concentrated barrage into the rear of the alien vessel. Explosions rippled across its hull as the enemy's ship shuddered, its once fluid movements becoming sluggish. We've crippled them! Bowen exclaimed, relief flooding his voice. Kane didn't allow herself to relax just yet. Keep your eyes on that ship. They're not out of the fight. As the enemy vessel drifted, smoke trailing from its engines, the tension on the bridge began to ease. The crew exchanged cautious glances, hopeful but wary. Kane, however, remained on edge. Something didn't feel right. This had been too easy. Captain, Bowen said quietly, his face pale as he stared at his console. They're powering up again. Something big. Kane's heart sank. The alien ship's weapon systems flickered back to life, and the crew's hope was extinguished in an instant. Whatever was coming, it would be worse than anything they had faced before. To be continued. The Resolute shuddered violently, the sound of metal groaning under pressure reverberating through the bridge. Captain Kane stood firm, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she watched the alien warship charge its weapon. A bright, pulsating light formed at the core of the enemy ship, and she could almost feel the heat radiating from the screen. Shields at 30%! Bowen shouted, urgency etching deeper lines into his youthful face. Kane clenched her fists, her mind racing. They had a narrow window to disable their foe, but they were dangerously outmatched. Status on the aft shields? She demanded. Not enough power, Captain, a technician reported, his eyes flickering nervously between the readings. We can't hold both fronts. Kane glanced at the viewscreen just as the alien warship fired again. A blinding beam of energy shot forth, illuminating the vastness of space. The crew braced themselves, instinctively reaching for handholds as the ship bucked under the impact. Alarms blared, and red lights flashed ominously. Report! Kane shouted, struggling to maintain control over the chaos enveloping them. The aft shields collapsed! Bowen exclaimed, his fingers flying across the console. But we've got a breach in the engine room. Kane felt her stomach drop. The engine room was the ship's lifeblood. If it failed, so would they. "Send a team to seal the breach," she ordered, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We need to keep moving." Just then, a voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, this is Chief Engineer Zarek. The breach is too severe. We need to vent the plasma, or we'll overload the reactor." Kane's mind raced. Overloading the reactor would mean a catastrophic explosion, potentially destroying the Resolute and anyone nearby. But what choice did she have? "Vent the plasma, Chief." "Do it," she commanded, determination hardening her resolve. "Understood. Initiating now." Zarek's voice was resolute, but there was a hint of despair that tugged at Kane's heart. As the engineers worked frantically, Kane turned her attention back to the viewscreen. The enemy vessel was moving again, gliding with a predatory grace, its weapons primed and ready. In that moment, a dangerous thought sparked in her mind. "Bowen," she said, voice low but urgent, "what if we turn this fight into a game of deception?" He met her gaze, confusion mingling with intrigue. "What do you mean?" "If we can simulate an overload, they might back off. We'll use the ship's systems to project a critical failure in the reactor. If we can convince them we're about to blow, they might think we're vulnerable," Bowen finished, understanding dawning. "And let their guard down." "Exactly. We can use their own strategy against them," Kane said, a fire igniting in her chest. Bowen nodded, already typing furiously at his console. "I'll rig the reactor to emit a surge of energy, making it look like we're on the brink of detonation." Kane glanced at her crew. Each face reflected the weight of the plan, their expressions shifting from fear to a cautious hope. "We'll need to time this perfectly. If we fail, we'll be sitting ducks." "Got it, Captain," Bowen replied, his voice steady. "I'll set the systems to flash an overload warning on their scanners. Just give me a moment." Kane's heart raced as she watched Bowen work. The alien ship loomed larger in the viewscreen, its weapons aimed straight at them, ready to unleash devastation. "Now!" Kane commanded, her voice sharp with urgency. Bowen pressed the final key. A flash erupted from the Resolute, signaling a critical failure. The lights flickered, and the ship shuddered again, this time from the energy discharge rather than an enemy blast. Kane held her breath, eyes fixed on the alien vessel. For a heartbeat, there was silence. The alien ship hesitated, its weapons flickering uncertainly. The crew exchanged glances, hope igniting in their eyes. Kane seized the moment. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Get ready to fire once they're in range." The bridge buzzed with renewed energy, the crew readying themselves for what came next. The alien ship's sensors would pick up on their simulated vulnerability. If they could just play it right, they might yet turn the tide of this battle. As the enemy hesitated, Kane's determination solidified. They were far from defeated, and she would fight tooth and nail to protect her crew and ship. To be continued. The atmosphere in the bridge of the Resolute crackled with tension as Captain Kane focused intently on the viewscreen. The alien warship loomed large, its menacing silhouette outlined against the backdrop of distant stars. The crew held their breath, anticipation thick in the air. Kane could almost feel the weight of their collective hope and fear pressing down on her shoulders. "Captain," Bowen said, his voice steady despite the chaos, "the enemy is recalibrating their weapons systems. It looks like they're about to fire again." Kane's mind raced, each heartbeat echoing the urgency of their situation. "We need to act now," she declared, resolve hardening her features. "Bowen, reroute power to the forward shields and prepare to fire all weapons on my mark. Zarek, I want the engines ready for a full burn. We need to be quick and decisive." "Yes, ma'am," both men responded, their fingers flying across the consoles. The enemy ship began to glow, energy pooling at its weapons tip like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Kane's heart pounded as she weighed their options. They had pulled off the ruse with the reactor, but they could not count on it working again. "Now, Resolute!" Kane shouted. "Fire at will!" The Resolute shuddered as the weapons system whirred to life, bright projectiles slicing through space toward the enemy vessel. In an instant, the air was filled with the echoing sounds of explosions. The enemy's ship's shields flickered under the onslaught, but they held, absorbing the impact as its weapons began to charge. "Direct hit on their shields," Bowen reported, his excitement evident. "They're weakening." "Don't let up," Kane urged, her pulse quickening. "Fire again!" Another volley of fire erupted from the Resolute, and Kane watched as the alien ship staggered, its silhouette trembling in the darkness. But her triumph was short-lived. The enemy's ship unleashed its own barrage, beams of energy striking the Resolute with a violent force. Alarms blared, and the bridge shook as the ship took damage. "Shields at 15%, a technician yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "Redirect auxiliary power to the shields," Kane ordered, but her heart sank. Even with the power shift, their defenses were crumbling. "Captain, we've got a breach in the aft compartment," Zarek shouted. "We can't sustain much longer." Kane's mind spun, each new development pushing her to think faster. "Get the engineers to seal it. We need to hold on a little longer." A fierce determination ignited within her as she watched the alien vessel struggle to stabilize its weaponry. "We can do this," she murmured more to herself than her crew. "Captain, the enemy is firing again," Bowen warned. "Brace for impact," Kane shouted, gripping the armrest of her command chair as the ship trembled violently. The energy beams sliced through the Resolute, and the world around them exploded into a kaleidoscope of sound and fury. Kane's breath caught as the lights flickered and her vision blurred, but she fought to remain focused. "Status report," she called out, her voice rising above the chaos. "Shields collapsed. We're losing power," Bowen shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Kane took a deep breath, fighting to calm her racing thoughts. This was not the end. She would not let it be. "All hands, prepare for evasive maneuvers," she commanded. "We'll buy ourselves time to regroup." "Rerouting power to engines," Zarek confirmed, desperation evident in his tone. As the ship swerved, the crew struggled to maintain their footing. Kane's gaze locked onto the enemy vessel, seeing its struggle reflected in the flickering screens. An idea sparked in her mind, an audacious plan that could turn the tide. "Bowen!" she shouted, adrenaline pumping through her. "Can we jettison the reactor core? Create a diversion?" He blinked, shock momentarily overtaking his features. "That could cause a massive explosion, Captain." "Exactly," she replied, her heart pounding. "It'll buy us the time we need to regroup and hit them where it hurts." "Understood," Bowen replied, determination igniting in his eyes. He began typing furiously. "Prepare to jettison the reactor core on my mark," Kane ordered, her gaze unwavering on the enemy ship. "We need to distract them now." With every heartbeat, tension mounted. Kane knew the risk, but their survival depended on boldness. As the alien ship prepared to fire once more, she braced herself. "Now!" she shouted. The Resolute erupted in chaos as the reactor core jettisoned, a blinding light engulfing the ship. Kane's heart raced as she hoped against hope that their gamble would work. The explosion lit up the void of space, illuminating everything in its path. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though time stood still, and as the shockwave rippled through the stars, Kane knew they had only just begun to fight back. To be continued.